Hey guys, tonight we slip back into a world that smells nothing like the lavender-scented soaps you keep in your bathroom cabinet. You're standing in a narrow cobblestone alley, the air thick with the mingling aromas of wood smoke, rotting vegetables, and the unmistakable musk of unwashed bodies. Water drips from a gutter overhead, but no one's thinking about scrubbing themselves clean. The year is somewhere between 1300 and 1800, and you're about to find out why, for centuries, most Europeans avoided bathing altogether. You probably won't survive this, at least not without pinching your nose. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The alley leads you toward a small wooden door, and when you duck inside, you find a dim room lit by a single tallow candle. A family sits close to the hearth, their skin ruddy from the fire's heat, but dusty from days, maybe weeks without washing. You might expect that in a world before showers, people would at least pour a bucket over themselves from time to time, but no here. Bathing is rare sometimes, dangerously rare. And in their minds, this isn't laziness, it's wisdom. For much of Europe's history, water wasn't seen as a friend to health, but as a potential killer. Physicians educated in ancient and medieval medical theory warned that warm water opened the pores, leaving the body vulnerable to the bad air or miasmas believed to cause disease. That belief, paired with limited understanding of hygiene and the spread of infection, turned the act of bathing into a calculated risk. It's not that Europeans didn't know how to bathe. They had bathhouses inherited from Roman traditions and elaborate cleansing rituals. But something shifted. In the centuries after the fall of the Roman Empire, public bathhouses became centers, not just for washing, but for socializing, eating, drinking, and in some cases, illicit pleasures. The church began to frown upon these spaces, condemning them as morally suspect. By the late Middle Ages, many public baths were shut down under moral pressure. And then came the plagues. The Black Death of the mid-14th century wiped out perhaps half of Europe's population, and in its aftermath, fear reshaped daily life. Since no one knew that the plague was spread by fleas carried by rats, people blamed what they could see or smell. Medical authorities warned that bathing could weaken the body's defenses, making you an easy target for pestilence. In some places, local laws forbade bathing during certain seasons, especially in summer, when disease was thought to lurk in the warm air. Imagine yourself here in a 16th century French village. The river is just beyond the market, yet it's not a place for dipping your whole body in. It's where you fetch water for cooking, where animals are washed, where waste sometimes flows downstream. Water is both precious and suspect. Laundry is done there but your skin. You might instead rely on linen undergarments changed often enough to rub away surface dirt. To bathe might mean little more than washing your face, hands, and feet with a damp cloth. Clothing, in fact, becomes your invisible shield. Layers of fabric, especially the clean linen worn closest to the skin, are thought to draw out and absorb the body's impurities. Changing your shirt is in effect cleaning your body. The wealthy might change linen daily, the poor perhaps once a week, if that. And perfume, from rosewater to musk, takes on an almost magical role in covering and purifying the body's natural scent. But the story isn't one of total filth. You walk into a manor house and find that the lady of the home has a wooden tub brought into her chamber once or twice a year, filled with heated water, carried up in buckets. She will sit in it while her servants pour scented infusions over her head. It's a grand, rare event perhaps for a wedding or a major festival. Meanwhile, her servants may never see such a luxury in their lives. By now, you start to sense the gulf between classes, the way bathing customs vary, not just by wealth, but by geography, climate, and the availability of clean water. In Scandinavia, for example, wooden saunas and steam baths survive even when the rest of Europe turns away from washing. In the Ottoman-influenced parts of Eastern Europe, hammams remain central to life. But in much of Western Europe, you carry the conviction that regular bathing is unnecessary or worse, unhealthy. Your journey through these narrow streets is just beginning, but already you feel the strangeness of a world where to step into a tub might be considered reckless, even sinful. You wonder how these ideas became so entrenched and how they would eventually be undone. And so, as the candle gutters in its holder and the family settles down for the night in their shared bed, the smell of the day still clinging to their skin, you turn to leave, stepping back into the cool, unwashed darkness of the street. You step away from the dimly lit house and into the narrow street again, the sky above fading to an indigo haze. Somewhere down the lane, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer rings out, mingling with the occasional bark of a dog. You can still feel the warmth of the hearth on your skin, but it's already giving way to the chill of the night air. You walk, and with every step you notice how the scent of humanity clings to these streets. Not offensive to those who live here, but to you, a modern visitor, it's impossible to ignore. Yet for them, the smell is simply part of life, no more remarkable than the smoke rising from the chimneys. You pass a group of men huddled under the overhang of a tavern. They're deep in conversation about the harvest, their hands wrapped around mugs of ale. Their clothes are stained from work in the fields, and though they haven't bathed in weeks, they look perfectly at ease. In their minds, health is not linked to soap and water, but to balance the balance of humors in the body, the stability of the air you breathe, and the avoidance of anything that might tip that balance toward sickness. You're reminded that this is a world shaped by Galen's medical theories, filtered through centuries of interpretation, hot and cold, wet and dry, all carefully regulated in diet, clothing, and daily habits. Bathing in this system is not a daily refresh, but a serious medical intervention. When you wash, you alter the body's temperature and moisture, potentially disturbing the humors. And because the prevailing belief holds that disease seeps in through the pores, opening them with warm water is dangerous. You're more likely to be told to rub your body with cloths, to dust yourself with powders, or to perfume yourself with herbs, than to submerge yourself in a bath. The absence of regular bathing isn't just about medicine or fear, though. It's also about labor. Heating enough water to fill a tub means hauling bucket after bucket from a well, or stream lighting a fire large enough to warm it, and pouring it into a vessel that might have to be assembled in the middle of your home. For most people, that effort isn't worth the fleeting comfort of a soak, especially when life is filled with constant work. Your path takes you toward the edge of town, where the houses grow smaller, and the air smells faintly of animals. Behind a low fence, a woman tends to a pot of boiling linens, the steam rising in great clouds. This, you realize, is laundry day, and in her mind, it is far more important than bathing herself. Clean linens against the skin are what keep you fresh in this world. She stirs the pot with a wooden paddle, occasionally pulling out a shirt and wringing it before hanging it on a line. The heat, the smell of lye soap, and the sting of steam on her face are all familiar burdens. Further along, you pass a small stream trickling through a ditch. The water is cloudy, carrying bits of straw dirt and kitchen scraps from upstream. It's easy to see why this wouldn't be anyone's first choice for bathing. Even if you wanted to immerse yourself in it, you'd be surrounded by the runoff of the whole village. This is one reason why early modern Europeans came to view water itself as suspect. It could carry not just dirt, but disease. When they did wash more thoroughly, people sometimes turned to alternative methods. Vinegar rubs were common, as were herbal infusions, thought to ward off illness. You picture yourself in a small room where someone is preparing such a wash, rosemary and lavender steeping in a pot. The warm, fragrant liquid poured over a cloth and dabbed onto the skin. It is a careful process meant to cleanse without opening the body too much to the outside air. Still, it's worth remembering that this aversion to bathing wasn't universal across all of Europe. In some rural areas where streams ran cleaner and population was sparse, people might bathe more often. In some cities, small private bathhouses clung to life, offering services to those who could afford them. But in the heart of many Western European towns, the combination of medical theory, moral warnings, and sheer practicality meant that weeks or even months might pass without a single full-body wash. As you leave the stream behind, you catch sight of a church steeple silhouetted against the evening sky. The bells begin to ring, and the sound carries across the rooftops. In this world, the church doesn't just shape your spiritual life, it shapes your physical habits too. The suspicion of public bathhouses isn't only about disease, it's about morality. In the eyes of many church leaders, places where men and women bathe, even separately, are too easily associated with vanity, lust, and sin. And so by the time you reach the square at the center of town, you understand that what you might see as simple self-care is in this time a web of beliefs, fears, and limitations. The fountain at the square's heart trickles with fresh water, but it is meant for drinking, not bathing. A few townsfolk filled their jugs, nodding politely to one another, and carry the water home. You follow their example, imagining what it would be like to carry every drop you use for cooking, cleaning, and drinking, and to think twice before wasting it on washing your whole body. The night deepens. You tuck your cloak tighter around your shoulders, the scent of smoke and humanity still hanging in the air. The longer you walk these streets, the more you begin to blend into them, your senses adapting, your initial shock fading. In a world like this, you wouldn't miss your showers. You'd forget them. And that perhaps is the strangest thing of all. The moon is higher now, casting a pale glow over the uneven rooftops. You follow a narrow lane that winds away from the market square, past houses whose shutters are already closed against the night. Somewhere in the dark, you hear the soft splash of a bucket being lowered into a well, the creak of the rope on its pulley, and then the grunt of effort as someone hauls it up. Water in this place and time is always work. Every drop you touch has been drawn from the ground or carried from a stream, and that reality shapes your choices. Bathing, a full head-to-toe immersion, is a luxury of time, effort, and fuel that few can afford. You come to a low building with a crooked sign, a bathhouse. Its door is shut, but a faint light glimmers through the cracks. If you could step inside, you'd find a far different world than the one you've just walked through. The air would be heavy with steam and the sharp, almost medicinal scent of herbs. There would be benches where patrons sit to sweat before washing, and tubs where water is heated over open fires. But such places are rare now. The plague years and the church's moral crusades have left most towns without them. Those that remain operate quietly, catering to a clientele who can pay not only for the water and firewood, but also for the privacy. In the centuries before bathhouses had been social hubs, you might come here not only to wash, but to gossip, eat, drink, and depending on the city, seek other forms of entertainment, some of them the kind that scandalized priests and magistrates. In the public mind, cleanliness and vice became dangerously linked, and as fear of disease rose, the bathhouse fell from grace. In many regions, they closed altogether, their wooden frames dismantled for firewood, their tubs left to rot. As you walk on, the air grows colder and the houses sparser. Out here on the fringes of town, you pass small farmsteads. Through an open doorway, you glimpse a family gathered around a wooden table. A pot of stew simmers over the fire, and the warmth spills out into the cool night. You notice the sheen of work on their faces, the kind that comes from hours in the fields, not from steam in a bath. Washing for them is a quick rinse at the end of the day, hands, face, perhaps the feet. Enough to remove the grime you can see, but never enough to soak the skin or open the pores. These habits aren't just about scarcity or superstition. They are woven into the rhythm of the year. In winter, heating water is a costly drain on the firewood you need to survive the cold. In summer, when disease is thought to be most rampant, immersing yourself in water is seen as courting disaster. And so the human body becomes accustomed to its own scent, to the thin layer of dust and sweat that clings to it. In such a world, clean means something different. It means not visibly filthy, not foul-smelling enough to offend those around you, and most of all, not weakened by the dangerous act of bathing too often. The road dips into a shallow valley where a small river glints in the moonlight. You pause on its bank, the sound of its current soft against the night. This is where laundry is done, where buckets are filled for cooking, and where children sometimes splash in the shallows on warm days. But here too, the water is shared with livestock and carries the runoff from the surrounding fields. To immerse yourself in it is to risk illness, and without the knowledge of microbes or contamination, the danger is understood only in vague, ominous terms. The water is unclean, and that is enough to stay away. Still, there are exceptions. On rare occasions, after a festival before a wedding, or in the aftermath of illness, people do bathe fully. You imagine a scene in the cramped interior of a peasant's home, a wooden tub hauled out from a corner filled by bucket after bucket from the fire-heated pot. The bather sits while the spouse or servant pours warm water over their shoulders, working soap, harsh, lye-based, stinging the skin into the hair and along the arms. It is as much a ritual as a chore performed with care and deliberation. The water cools quickly, and by the end it's cloudy with the dirt of weeks. When the bath is done, the water is carried outside and dumped onto the earth. You look up and see the faint glow of another settlement in the distance, perhaps a larger town, with richer households, where bathing customs are a little more elaborate. There you might find perfumed waters and copper tubs for the wealthy, and even imported soaps from places like Castile or Marseille. But for the vast majority, whether in countryside or city, the philosophy is the same. Protect your body's humors, shield yourself from disease, and rely on linen and scent to keep you clean. As you follow the river's edge toward the next cluster of lights, you begin to realize how profoundly different the sensory world of the past was. In your own time, the faintest whiff of body odor is enough to send you reaching for deodorant or soap. Here the air is full of the scent of people, animals, cooking fires, and the earth itself. It is not unpleasant to those who live in it. It is the fabric of life. You find yourself breathing it in, letting it settle around you like another layer of clothing. Somewhere ahead, a dog barks and a shutter bangs in the wind. You adjust your pace, the gravel crunching softly underfoot, and think about the long centuries in which Europeans lived like this, not because they didn't care about cleanliness, but because their definition of it was shaped by beliefs and realities entirely unlike your own. And you realize as the river slips away into the darkness behind you that this story is only beginning to unfold. The path rises gently from the riverbank, leading you toward the faint glow of oil lamps scattered through the next settlement. The road here is rutted, the stones worn by centuries of cartwheels and hooves. As you crest the hill, the landscape opens into a patchwork of fields, each divided by hedgerows and narrow dirt tracks. In the dim light, you can make out silhouettes moving in the fields. Late workers bringing in the last of the harvest, their movements steady and unhurried. In this world, every ounce of energy counts, and bathing is not a matter of refreshment, but a diversion from more pressing tasks. You draw closer to the village and pass a modest house with a wooden porch. On the step, a man sits with a small basin at his feet, dipping a cloth in the water and rubbing it briskly over his arms and face. This is the most common form of bathing you'll find here, targeted cleaning, focused on the parts of the body most exposed to dirt and seen by others. The rest of him will remain untouched by water for weeks, perhaps months, until there's a compelling reason to go further. The smell of bread baking drifts through the cool air, mingling with the faint tang of smoke. You follow it to a small bakery, where the ovens glow red through an open doorway. Inside, the baker wipes sweat from his forehead with a flowery sleeve. His workday is nearly done, and tomorrow he will pull on the same clothes, the scent of yeast and ash clinging to him. He does not need to wash it away. To him, this is the smell of honest labor. You step out again and wander toward the village center. Here, in the shadow of a small chapel, you notice a stone basin set on a pedestal. Clear water flows into it from a spout, the faint trickle echoing in the quiet. This is the public fountain, the heart of the village's water supply. Women come here with pails balanced on their hips, exchanging news while they wait their turn. A few children splash their hands in the basin, but no one climbs in. The fountain is for drinking and cooking, not for bathing, and it is treated with a kind of reverence. In the 16th and 17th centuries, water sources like this were often protected by local regulations. The idea was not only to preserve the supply, but to guard against illness and to keep order. Public washing, especially of the body, was frowned upon not only for reasons of modesty, but because it was thought to disturb the water's purity. If you wanted to wash more thoroughly, you did it at home in a tub or barrel, or not at all. Your mind drifts to the lives of the wealthy who navigated these beliefs in a different way. In their manor houses and city residences, they might have large copper or wooden tubs and servants to carry water up from the kitchen hearth. But even they rarely bathed frequently. Instead, they changed their linen undergarments daily, or at least more often than the poor, and used scented waters or powders to keep their bodies fresh. Wealth offered options, but not the habit of daily bathing. That idea simply did not exist here. In one house, you pass the windows glow with candlelight, and you glimpse a woman at her dressing table. She dips a cloth into a small bowl of rose water, dabbing it along her neck and wrists. On the table beside her sits a tiny jar of pomander paste, a blend of herbs and resins meant to ward off bad smells, and more importantly, bad air. Inhaling sweet scents is believed to protect you from sickness, and the richer you are, the more elaborate your fragrances become. The road curves again, taking you past a stable where the warm scent of hay and horses wraps around you. A groom moves between the stalls, brushing down a mare's coat. Here, cleanliness is measured differently. An animal's coat brushed to a shine tack, kept free of mud, straw bedding, replaced regularly. The people who tend these animals may not bathe, but they understand the value of care just applied in ways that match their world's priorities. As you wander on, you notice the way life here is built around patterns of conservation. Firewood is precious, so heating large amounts of water is avoided unless absolutely necessary. Time is equally precious, and bathing competes with tasks like preserving food, tending livestock, and repairing tools. Even on feast days, the preparation of clothes, hair, and scent is often more important than washing the body itself. By now, the stars are sharp in the night sky. You pause in the village square, listening to the creak of a sign swinging in the breeze, and realize how far you've traveled, not just in space, but in mindset. To live here is to see water as a resource to guard, not to pour over your head every morning. It is to believe that health depends more on balance and restraint than on scrubbing and soap. Somewhere in the distance, a dog's howl carries on the wind, followed by the muffled toll of a bell. You pull your cloak tighter, feeling the weight of the centuries pressing in around you, and step forward again, ready to follow this trail deeper into the past, into a Europe where the absence of bathing was not neglect, but the norm sustained by custom belief and necessity. You leave the square behind, following a narrow lane that slopes gently downward toward a cluster of larger houses. Here, the streets are a little wider and the cobblestones better laid. You can tell this is the wealthier part of town. The windows have glass, the doors are sturdier, and faint strains of music drift from one of the houses where a gathering is underway. Still, even here, the air holds the same faint musk of bodies unwashed for weeks, masked with layers of perfume and the sweet smoke of burning incense. You pause at the threshold of a grand house. Through the open door, you glimpse a hall lit by chandeliers of flickering candles. Servants move silently between the guests, bearing trays of wine and sweetmeats. A lady in a brocade gown passes near the doorway, and you catch the faint scent of rosewater as she glides by. Her gown is impeccable, her hair carefully dressed, her hands spotless, yet beneath the layers of linen and silk, her skin has not felt the shock of a bath for weeks. Instead, she has changed her linen shift that morning and perhaps dabbed her skin with scented cloths. This is cleanliness here, the appearance and fragrance of freshness, not the immersion of the body in water. In the corner of the room, a small brazier burns with herbs and spices, cinnamon cloves, perhaps a sprig of rosemary. Guests pause by it, drawing the scented air into their lungs. The belief is simple, and deeply held sweet smells strengthen the body and guard against disease, while foul odors weaken and corrupt it. This theory of airs shapes not only the way people bathe or don't, but the way they live, build, and decorate their homes. You move on, slipping out into the street again. The music fades, replaced by the soft sound of your own footsteps. Further along, you pass another large home, this one with a low fence around a small courtyard. A servant is pouring water into a large wooden tub, steam rising into the night air. The tub is not for the whole household, perhaps only for the master or for a single special occasion. Such baths are planned days in advance, requiring firewood space and time to prepare. They are rare enough that they are remembered afterward, talked about the way you might recall a fine meal or an outing. Beyond the houses, the road turns toward open countryside. Here the land rolls gently under the moonlight, dotted with small cottages, whose chimneys send thin trails of smoke into the sky. You pass one of these cottages and catch sight of its inhabitants gathered inside a family, sitting close to the hearth. The father is mending a net, the mother carding wool, the children half asleep on a bench. On a stool by the fire is a basin of warm water, where the mother occasionally dips a cloth to wipe the youngest child's hands and face. That is their bath for the day, quick, efficient, focused on what matters. As you watch, you start to understand that in this world, bathing is not an indulgence you fit into your schedule. It's a calculated act that must justify its cost in time, labor, and perceived risk. And yet these people are not indifferent to appearance or scent. They wash their hands before eating, rinse their mouths with herbal waters, and comb their hair to keep it free of visible dirt or lice. They change linen when they can, and they know how to make a scented sachet from dried flowers to freshen a chest of clothes. Cleanliness is there, just not in the form you expect. You resume your walk the road, now flanked by hedges alive with the quiet stirrings of night creatures. A faint rustle here, a flutter of wings there. You think about the knowledge that has not yet come to this world, the understanding of bacteria, of how disease really spreads. Without it, people cling to the tools they know, balance of humors, sweet scents, protective clothing, avoidance of dangerous practices like frequent bathing. In a way, it makes sense. When you cannot see the enemy, you trust the patterns handed down to you. Up ahead, a dim light shines from the open door of a small alehouse. You step inside and find a low-ceilinged room, its walls dark with smoke. Men sit at rough tables, mugs in hand, their boots caked with mud. A serving girl moves among them, her dress patched but clean, her hair tied back. In one corner, a man in a faded cloak tells a story to anyone who will listen, something about a city far away where people still visit public baths. The locals listen with polite interest, but you can see in their faces that such habits seem foreign, almost foolish. Why risk your health for the fleeting comfort of sitting in hot water? When you step back into the night, the air feels colder, the stars brighter. You pull your cloak closer and keep walking the road, now leading toward a darker horizon. Somewhere ahead, the land dips toward a river that has seen centuries of human life pass along its banks. And as you approach it, you can't help but wonder how long these ideas about bathing will hold sway, and what it will take to change them. The road begins to slope gently downward again, and the air grows damper as you near the river. In the moonlight, the water gleams like a strip of polished metal, winding its way between low grassy banks. You pause for a moment, listening to the faint lap of the current against the stones. In your world, this might be an invitation to strip off and plunge in. But here in the 17th century, you keep your cloak on and your distance. The river is beautiful, but it's also a source of deep suspicion. You remember the whispered warnings passed from parent to child. Rivers are treacherous, not just for their currents, but for what they carry. They're believed to harbor the miasmas, the bad airs that bring fevers, coughs, and worse. If you've just bathed, your pores are open and your body is weakened, making you a perfect target for those invisible forces. Best to stay dry, keep your clothing intact, and let your skin's natural barrier its unwashed state protect you. You walk along the bank until you come to a small wooden chapel set a little way back from the water. Its door is open, and inside a single candle burns before the altar. The priest is kneeling, murmuring his prayers. You know that here religion plays a complex role in the history of bathing. The church itself, in its early centuries, did not forbid bathing outright. Monasteries often had bathhouses, and monks might bathe several times a year, sometimes even weekly, depending on their rules. But as public bathhouses became linked to prostitution and idle pleasure, sermons began to warn against them, encouraging modesty and restraint. The church also emphasized inner purity over outer cleanliness. To be clean in soul mattered more than to be clean in body. Pilgrims might go unwashed for months on their journeys, seeing the grime on their skin as a badge of piety. Saints were sometimes praised for avoiding baths, entirely enduring the filth as a form of humility and self-denial. In such a culture, to bathe too often could be seen as vanity, a sign that you cared more for your appearance than your moral state. Stepping back outside, you notice a path leading toward a small cluster of outbuildings. The scent of drying herbs meets you before you reach them, bunches of lavender, sage, and rosemary hanging from the rafters. These herbs are not just for cooking. They're also part of the household's defense against disease. Sprigs might be sewn into clothing or placed under pillows to guard the sleeper from foul airs. They could be boiled to make an infusion for wiping down the body, a ritual that kept you clean without the hazards of a full bath. Following the path further, you come to a low stone cottage where a single window glows faintly. Inside, a woman sits at a table, carefully filling small cloth bags with dried flowers and powdered orris root. She ties them with string and sets them in a basket. These sachets will be tucked into linen chests, where they'll scent the garments, and in the prevailing belief, keep the wearer healthy. Clothing and scent have become Europe's primary tools of cleanliness, not water. As the night deepens, you notice how these customs shape even the way people move through space. Streets are narrow to block the wind, windows are small to keep the air still. In summer, shutters might stay closed to keep out the bad, warm air. Fresh air is not valued as you think of it. It is suspected. And if you avoid air, you also avoid unnecessary exposure to water. You pass a stable where the rhythmic sound of a horse chewing hay mingles with the distant hoot of an owl. A young boy, perhaps an apprentice, is sleeping on a bed of straw in the corner. His hands are grubby, his face smudged with soot, but his clothes, especially the linen shirt under his jerkin, are relatively clean. He will wear that shirt until it begins to feel rough with sweat and dust, then swap it for another, letting the linen's fibers absorb what the water would otherwise wash away. It's easy to forget, as you walk through this world, how limited the options truly are. Soap exists, but it's harsh and expensive, made from animal fat, and lye, often scented with herbs to mask its acrid smell. Heating water requires fuel that might be better used for cooking or warmth. And for every family, there is the ever-present undercurrent of fear that too much washing will invite sickness instead of health. Ahead, the river bends away from the path, and you find yourself climbing a gentle hill toward another settlement. Here, the houses are clustered close together, their thatched roofs nearly touching. In the middle of the main lane, a small shrine to the Virgin Mary stands, draped with flowers. You see a woman pause before it, crossing herself and murmuring a prayer. In her world, faith offers protection that water does not. She carries a bucket, but you know it's for cooking or the animals, not for a bath. By the time you reach the top of the hill, the village behind you looks like a scattering of embers in the dark. The air is still heavy with the scent of earth and smoke. You realize that to these people, their world is perfectly clean, clean enough to live, to work, to pray. The grime that clings to them, Shem, is not a mark of shame, but a sign of life lived within the bounds of nature, belief, and necessity. And as you step forward into the next stretch of road, you begin to sense how deeply this philosophy has taken root, and how long it will take before Watchter regains its place in the daily life of Europe. The road ahead flattens, and you find yourself walking into a small market town. It's late, and most of the stalls are shuttered, but here and there you see signs of life. A candle burning behind a baker's window, the distant clink of a blacksmith finishing one last piece before bed. The air smells of wood smoke, dried fish, and the faint tang of manure from the day's traffic. It's not unpleasant to those who live here. To them, it's simply the scent of a town going about its business. You step into the shadow of an overhanging building and pause to take in the layout of the square. At its center stands a tall wooden post around which people gather during the day to trade goods and news. A well sits off to one side, its rope and bucket ready for use. You notice how central water is to the life of the town, yet how narrowly it is used. This well is for drinking, for cooking, for making ale and bread. No one here would dream of drawing enough from it to fill a bathing tub. That would be wasteful, even unthinkable. Walking past the well, you catch sight of a narrow alley that leads to the back of a row of houses. In one yard, a man is tending a small copper cauldron set over a fire. Steam curls from its surface, carrying with it the sharp scent of soapwort and ash. He's not preparing a bath, he's making lye soap for laundry. In this time, clothes are scrubbed and boiled more often than bodies are washed. Linen is the body's filter. If you keep it clean, you keep yourself clean, at least by the standards of the day. You recall that for centuries, medical theory reinforced this idea. Physicians advised against washing the whole body too often, but they recommended regular laundering of undergarments. They understood in a way that clean linen was healthier, even if they didn't know why. They thought it drew impurities out of the skin, and replacing it with fresh fabric removed those impurities from the body. This is why portraits from the era often show people in pristine white collars and cuffs, even if the rest of them went unwashed for weeks. The alley opens back onto the main street where the lamplighter is making his rounds. He moves slowly, touching each wick with his long pole, coaxing small flames to life. The glow throws shadows across the timbered facades, revealing carved beams, shuttered windows, and the occasional painted sign. You pass an apothecary's shop, its window displaying jars of dried herbs and strange powders. Inside, a man in a dark robe is measuring out a blend of ground rosemary and lavender. This, he explains to a customer, can be steeped in vinegar to make a cleansing water for wiping the skin. It is not just for scent, it is protection, a layer against sickness. Continuing on, you hear a faint hum of voices from a tavern at the far end of the street. Stepping closer, you peek inside and see a group of travelers gathered around a table, their cloaks dusty from the road. One of them is telling a story about a far-off port city where merchants bathe in great stone pools before doing business. The locals listen with curiosity, but there's a note of skepticism in their smiles. To them, such habits sound exotic, even reckless, like tempting fate for the sake of vanity. You slip back into the night, your steps taking you past the edge of the town and into open fields. The moonlight silver washes the furrows, and a faint mist hangs over the grass. In the distance, you see the outline of a larger building, perhaps a monastery. Such places are exceptions to the rule, often having their own baths for ritual purposes or for caring for the sick. But even there, bathing is measured seasonal and purposeful, never the daily act it will become centuries later. As you draw closer, you notice the quiet hum of monastic life. A single candle burns in an upper window, likely a monk copying manuscripts late into the night. Somewhere within those walls there may be a bathhouse, small, plain, and used sparingly. Here bathing is tied to discipline, not indulgence, a practice performed under rules as strict as the prayers that mark the hours. You stop for a moment on the road, looking back at the town you've just left. It's a patch of warmth and light in an otherwise dark landscape, and it strikes you how self-contained it is. Every belief about cleanliness, every habit around water is woven into the life of the place. The people here do not feel deprived. They feel safe, protected by the balance they believe they maintain between their bodies, their clothing, their environment, and the invisible forces that might harm them. The wind picks up, tugging at your cloak, carrying with it the smell of turned earth and distant wood fires. You take a deep breath and continue on toward the monastery gates, ready to step inside and see how even in the rare places where bathing survives, it is nothing like what you know, and nothing like what the rest of Europe will embrace in centuries to come. The monastery gates loom ahead, tall and weathered, their wooden beams banded with blackened iron. You step up to them, and after a brief wait, a lay brother opens the door just wide enough to admit you. Inside, the air is cooler, quieter, and touched with the faint scent of beeswax candles. Gravel crunches under your feet as you walk along a path lined with low hedges, the silence broken only by the distant toll of a bell marking the hour. The cloister surrounds you, its covered walkways framing a square of grass and herbs. Here monks move slowly, each step deliberate, their heads bowed. Their linen robes are clean, the white stark against the shadows. You know they follow a rule, perhaps the Benedictine, that dictates every part of their lives, from prayer to work to bodily care. Within these walls, bathing still exists, though stripped of luxury. It's done not for indulgence, but for health charity or religious preparation. A brother leads you to a low stone building tucked away behind the kitchens. Inside, the air is warm and damp. A large copper boiler squats in one corner, its chimney venting steam into the night. A row of shallow wooden tubs lines the wall, each big enough for a seated man. The water here is heated with care, firewood is not wasted, and baths are scheduled. The elderly, the sick, and those preparing for certain feast days may bathe under supervision. Even then, it is not a daily practice. A monk might wash thoroughly only once every few weeks or months, though he may rinse his face, hands, and feet more often. The ritual of bathing here is precise. Before immersion, the bather might be rubbed with coarse cloth to loosen dirt. Herbs, rosemary, thyme, or sage are sometimes steeped in the water to strengthen the body and close the pores afterward. The bath is brief, functional, and followed by drying with linen towels warmed by the fire. The monks believe this careful approach keeps the body clean without opening it to illness. You leave the bathhouse and step back into the cloister, the sound of soft chanting drifting from the chapel. The connection between body and soul here is constant. Just as prayer cleanses the spirit, controlled washing cleanses the body, but neither is done carelessly. The monk's habits mirror the wider world, restraint, moderation. and avoidance of anything that might tip the balance of health. Walking through the gardens, you see neat rows of medicinal plants. Lavender, mint, chamomile, and yarrow grow alongside onions and leeks. These herbs serve many purposes, flavoring food, scenting rooms, infusing washing water, and making poultices. A sprig of rosemary tucked into a sleeve or pressed between the folds of a linen shirt can mask odors for days. In a time when water itself is suspect, scent becomes both a comfort and a shield. Beyond the monastery walls, you know the same principles apply in towns and villages. Seasonal bathing is a quiet rhythm marked by practical and symbolic moments. A bath might be taken in spring as part of preparation for Easter or in late summer before a wedding. Harvest might call for a quick washing of hands and faces before a communal feast. These moments stand out because they are exceptions to the norm occasions where water is used freely, though still with care. In wealthier households, seasonal baths might be tied to travel. When a nobleman returns from a long journey, the servants might prepare a tub heating water in great kettles over the kitchen fire. The bath is not merely about removing dirt. It is a signal of renewal, marking the transition from the hardships of the road to the comfort of home. For a bride, a bath before the wedding is both practical and ceremonial, scented with herbs to please the senses, and according to belief, to guard her from illness. But even in these moments, the old fears remain. Doctors and household manuals warn against staying in the water too long, against bathing after heavy exercise, or against going outdoors immediately afterward. The idea that the body is vulnerable when freshly washed runs deep. A cold breeze on wet skin is not just unpleasant, it's a potential cause of fever chills or worse. As you make your way toward the monastery gate, again you glance back at the bathhouse, its windows dim now, steam no longer curling into the night. What you've seen here is a reminder that bathing never vanished completely from Europe. It survived in corners, under rules, in carefully measured forms. But for the majority beyond these walls, life goes on with little thought for immersing themselves in water. Stepping back onto the road, you feel the cool night wrap around you again. The land stretches out ahead, dotted with the faint glow of distant hearths. Somewhere out there, people are ending their day as they began it, with clean linen against their skin, the scent of herbs in the air, and no sense that they have denied themselves anything essential. And as you start walking toward the next village, you can't help but wonder when and how this balance between water scent and belief will finally tip, when the idea of bathing will transform from a rare, cautious act into an everyday habit. The road from the monastery winds through a stretch of open farmland, where the night is so still you can hear the faint rustle of wind moving through wheat stalks. In the distance, a cluster of lights marks the next town. As you draw closer, the smell changes, less of wood smoke and earth, more of the mingled aromas of an urban place, tanneries, cooking fires, waste in the gutters, and the breath of hundreds of people living close together. The town gates are open, but watched by a pair of guards, their halberds glinting in the moonlight. You step through and into a maze of streets, far busier than the quiet lanes you've left behind. Even at this hour, there are vendors selling roasted chestnuts, women carrying baskets of bread, and the occasional rumble of a cart over cobblestones. The buildings are taller here, pressed tight together, their upper floors leaning out over the street. Rainwater drips from gutters onto the stones below. Urban life in this time brings its own challenges. Waste disposal is haphazard. Water sources are often polluted, and the sheer density of people means that disease spreads quickly. In such conditions, you might think bathing would be encouraged, a way to keep the body clean. But the opposite happens. City water is mistrusted even more than rural streams, and doctors warn that in an epidemic, bathing will only make you more vulnerable. The advice is to stay dry, keep the pores closed, and rely on scented cloths and protective amulets to keep sickness away. You pass an apothecary's shop spilling warm light into the street. Inside, the shelves are lined with jars of herbs, powders, and syrups. A man in a long robe is grinding something in a mortar, the sharp, resinous smell of pine filling the air. He's preparing a scented vinegar, a popular cleansing agent in the city. This liquid will be dabbed onto the hands and face or sprinkled on a cloth to be held over the nose in crowded streets. It's believed to block the miasmas that hang in the air, especially in summer. Further along, you find a narrow lane that ends in what was once a public bathhouse. Its sign is faded, the door bolted. Through a crack in the shutters, you glimpse darkness and dust. This bathhouse, like many others, closed after one epidemic or another. People came to associate these spaces with the very diseases they hoped to avoid, believing the steam and shared water spread illness. In some cases, the closures were official, enforced by city authorities during outbreaks of plague or sweating sickness. In others, the fear alone was enough to drive customers away. And yet, even in the city, there are exceptions. In the wealthy districts, some homes have private bathing rooms, their walls tiled or paneled in wood. The rich might indulge in a warm bath after a long journey, or to mark a special occasion. Merchants returning from the East sometimes bring with them exotic soaps scented with spices, colored with saffron, wrapped in silk. But these luxuries are rare, and their use is sporadic. No one bathes daily. No one even thinks to. You stop at a small square where a fountain gurgles at the center. Children play around it, their hands darting into the water to splash each other. A few women fill their buckets, talking quietly. The fountain is fed by an aqueduct, its water cleaner than the wells in the poorer quarters, but still no one climbs in. The idea of using it for bathing simply isn't there. The water is too precious, too public, and too necessary for drinking. Walking on, you notice how the city is alive with smells. Fresh bread from a baker's oven, cured meat from a butcher's stall, manure from the street, the resinous tang of pine smoke from a brazier. In this world, the body's scent blends into the larger scent of the city. To smell of rosewater or musk is a mark of wealth. To smell of sweat is normal, unremarkable. You duck into a side street where a candle burns in the window of a barber-surgeon's shop. Inside, a man sits in a chair while the barber trims his hair and scrapes his beard with a straight razor. Hair and beard care are more common than bathing, partly because they can be done dry. A clean-shaven face and neatly combed hair create an appearance of cleanliness, even if the rest of the body has not been washed in weeks. The barber surgeon might also offer a vinegar rub for the hands and face another form of washing that never involves a tub. Back on the main street, the noise of the city swells, merchants calling to late shoppers, the rattle of a cart, the laughter from an open tavern door. You realize that here, as in the countryside, people live fully within a definition of cleanliness that excludes regular bathing. They do not see themselves as unwashed. They see themselves as sensible, safe, and in harmony with what they believe keeps them healthy. As you leave the square behind the road, narrows turning toward the poorer quarters, where houses lean together over alleyways barely wide enough to walk through. The air grows thicker here, the smells more concentrated. Somewhere in this warren of streets, You know disease could ignite in an instant. And in such a place, the old warnings about bathing, about opening the body to danger, feel sharper than ever. You keep moving past shuttered doors and dark windows until you reach a gate at the far end of town. Beyond it lies the open road again winding toward another horizon. You wonder what it will take, what combination of science, culture, and necessity to make this world trust water again. And you know that change, when it comes, will not arrive all at once. It will creep in slowly, carried on the feet of travelers, in the words of physicians, and in the habits of those who dare to try what others still fear. The road beyond the city stretches out like a pale ribbon under the moonlight, bordered by hedgerows that whisper softly in the breeze. You walk for hours, the sounds of the town fading behind you, until the outline of another settlement begins to take shape. This place feels different, not as crowded or smoky as the city you've left, but not quite the quiet village of earlier either. It is a market hub, a crossroads for merchants and travelers, and it has the air of a place that catches ideas from many directions. You enter just as the first signs of dawn begin to smudge the horizon with pale light. In the central square, a few stalls are already being set up, their owners yawning as they lay out their goods. You notice bolts of fine cloth, bundles of dried herbs, baskets of soap, the kind imported from the Mediterranean, smoother and more fragrant than the rough lye soap made locally. These soaps are luxuries here, bought for their scent and rarity as much as for their cleansing power. They might be used to wash the hands before a feast, or to scent linen rather than to scrub the whole body. Still, something is shifting here. You catch snatches of conversation about far-off cities, Venice, Constantinople, where bathing is said to be more common. Merchants returning from such places bring tales of marble bathhouses, tiled floors, and warm pools scented with rose and sandalwood. To the locals, these stories sound exotic, almost decadent, but they also plant seeds. For the wealthy, bathing begins to reappear as a symbol of refinement, of being worldly and connected. You pass an inn where a traveler is standing outside pouring a small bucket of water over his head. He's a foreigner. His accent marks him as such when he exchanges a few words with the innkeeper. The act draws a small crowd of curious onlookers. Some laugh and shake their heads. Others watch in silence, perhaps wondering what it would be like to start the day that way. Here the habit is still rare enough to be remarkable, even a little suspect, but it is no longer entirely alien. As you wander further into the town, you come across a building with a carved sign showing a copper tub and steam curling upward. This is a bathhouse, though not the crowded public kind of centuries past. It is a private establishment, open to those who can pay. Inside the rooms are small and well kept, with individual tubs and attendants who heat the water and add herbs for scent. Patrons come here not every day or even every week, but perhaps once a month for a wedding before a feast or after a long illness. The owner, a stout man with a ready smile, tells you that business is good among merchants and travelers. They are the ones bringing back the idea that bathing can be pleasant, even healthful. But he still hears the old warnings often enough that too much bathing weakens the body, that it invites chills, that it is a waste of time and fuel. He shrugs and says change comes slowly. Outside again, the streets are brightening as the sun rises higher. You pass a group of children carrying baskets of laundry toward the river. They chatter as they walk, splashing in the shallows, while their mothers scrub linen against smooth stones. The work is hard, but the air by the river is fresh, and the sunlight glints off the water. Now and then one of the children splashes their own arms and face, laughing at the shock of the cold. It's a small, unplanned kind of bathing, a reminder that water is still part of daily life, even if immersion is rare. In the marketplace, you pause to watch a physician speaking to a small crowd. He wears a black robe and a wide-brimmed hat, and he's holding up a jar of something that looks like thick golden syrup. He claims it will cleanse the body from within, purging the humors, without the dangers of opening the pores to air and water. The people listen intently. Here, health is still a matter of balanced forces, of avoiding anything that might disrupt the body's natural defenses. And yet you sense the beginnings of a new way of thinking. The imported soaps, the cautious return of bathhouses, the stories of foreign customs. These are small cracks in the wall of fear that has kept most Europeans from bathing regularly for centuries. For now, the changes are confined to certain classes, certain towns, certain moments. But they are changes nonetheless, and they hint at the transformation to come. As you leave the market square, the sound of traders bargaining fades behind you, replaced by the steady rhythm of your footsteps on the road. You head toward the next horizon, carrying with you the image of a world on the edge of shifting, a Europe, where the old fears still hold firm, but where little by little the idea of water as friend rather than foe is beginning to seep back in. The road ahead is broader now, the fields giving way to clusters of houses with tiled roofs instead of thatch. You can tell you're approaching a more prosperous region. The bridges are sturdier, the market stalls more orderly, and the travelers you pass wear finer cloaks and carry themselves with the confidence of people accustomed to trade and opportunity. It is here in the later 17th and early 18th centuries that the pace of change begins to quicken. You arrive in a bustling provincial town, its streets alive with the clatter of carriage wheels and the cries of hawkers selling ribbons, spices, and sweetmeats. Among the stalls, you notice something new, cakes of soap wrapped in paper, labeled with the names of perfumers from Paris, Marseille, and London. The colors are soft, pale pink, creamy yellow, faint green, and the scents, even from a distance, are more delicate than the harsh lye soap you've encountered before. For the wealthier citizens, these soaps are becoming part of a toilette ritual used to wash hands and face in basins of warm water brought by servants each morning. As you make your way toward the town square, you pass the window of a dressmaker's shop, where a finely dressed lady stands on a dais as her gown is adjusted. Behind her on a side table is a silver ewer and basin, elegant objects meant for pouring and catching water. These pieces are as much about display as they are about function, but they signal a subtle shift. Washing at least of visible parts of the body is becoming fashionable. It is a mark of refinement, a way of signaling that you belong to polite society. The influence of foreign travel is everywhere. In coffeehouses, merchants talk about the Turkish hammams they've visited, describing the marble rooms, the heat, the scrubbing, and the clouds of steam scented with orange blossom. Some listeners still wrinkle their noses, but others are intrigued. The idea of bathing is being reframed not as a reckless risk to health, but as a civilized pleasure. Walking deeper into the town, you come across a newly opened establishment, a bathing house advertised as offering private rooms, heated water, and the latest health advice. The sign outside shows a gentleman seated in a tub, attended by a servant pouring water from a jug. Inside, the air smells faintly of lavender, and the owner proudly explains that his baths are not the old, dangerous stews of medieval times. These are modern, private, clean, with water refreshed for each bather. He even quotes physicians who now claim that occasional bathing can strengthen the body by invigorating the skin. Still, daily bathing is far from the norm. Most people even here content themselves with a weekly or monthly wash, supplemented by frequent changes of linen. The belief in linen's purifying power hasn't disappeared. It has simply been joined by new habits. A gentleman might wash his face and hands in the morning, apply scent to mask any odor, and consider himself well-groomed. A lady might have her maid prepare a basin for rinsing her hair once a fortnight. The full-body bath remains an event, not a routine. In wealthier homes, bathing is becoming linked to the growing idea of comfort. Architects design dressing rooms with space for basins, ewers, and storage for soaps and towels. Portable tubs of copper or tin lined with cloth for warmth can be set up in a bedroom near the hearth. Heated water is carried up from the kitchen, and scented oils are added. The bather sits soaking briefly before being rubbed down with linen towels. It is a ritual that feels luxurious, and that luxury is part of the appeal. The streets hum with commerce as you leave the bathing house behind. In a bookseller's shop, you glance at a recently printed pamphlet on health, its pages urging moderation in all things, including bathing. The author warns against overindulgence but acknowledges that washing can refresh the body and mind if done sensibly. This cautious endorsement marks another step in the slow rehabilitation of bathing's reputation. In the evening, you dine at an inn where the owner boasts of having installed a hot bath for guests. He explains that travelers, especially from abroad, have begun to request it. Though it's used sparingly, the mere fact that he offers it is a point of pride, a sign that his inn is modern and accommodating. As night falls, you walk through the quiet streets past the glow of candles in windows. Behind some of those windows, basins are being filled, faces and hands, washed hair combed and scented before bed. Bathing is not yet an everyday habit, but it has begun to take on an aura of elegance and civility. The old fears are fading, at least among those who can afford the time and materials. And as you step beyond the town gates following the moonlit road toward your next destination, you know that this slow shift will eventually reach deeper into society. The idea of bathing as both healthful and refined has taken root, and in time it will flourish into something far more familiar to your own world. The road out of town runs straight for miles, bordered by poplars whose leaves shiver in the wind. You walk through the soft quiet of dawn until the landscape begins to change: broader fields, larger farmhouses, and eventually the silhouette of a city whose spires and domes catch the early light. This is an 18th century capital humming with the energy of trade politics and the Enlightenment. Ideas move through it like currents, and among those ideas is a growing curiosity about the human body, how it works, how it stays healthy, and how it might be improved. You enter through a triumphal gate into wide boulevards lined with stone buildings. Carriages rattle past, and the air carries the mingled scents of baking bread, fresh-cut flowers from morning vendors, and the less pleasant odors of horses and crowded streets. Still, there's something different here. In shop windows, you see porcelain wash basins, polished brass taps for drawing water, and neatly wrapped cakes of scented soap. These are no longer exotic luxuries. They're becoming marks of a modern household. In a fashionable quarter, you pause before a bathhouse built in the neoclassical style: tall columns, a carved pediment, and an air of respectability. The sign calls it a public bath and health establishment. Inside, the marble floors shine and the air is scented faintly with lemon and lavender. Individual bathing rooms can be rented by the hour, each with a tub and a small fireplace for heating water. The attendant proudly explains that these baths are recommended by physicians, who now speak of the skin as a vital organ that benefits from regular washing. It is a striking change from the warnings of centuries past. As you stroll further, you notice booksellers displaying pamphlets on personal hygiene. Some are written in the brisk, confident style of Enlightenment science, explaining circulation, respiration, and digestion, and linking cleanliness to physical well-being. Others blend the new science with older beliefs, still advising caution about cold drafts after a bath, but no longer condemning the practice itself. Physicians, once the loudest voices against frequent bathing, are now among its advocates, at least in moderate form. You pass a row of elegant houses where servants carry ewers and basins from room to room. In these homes, washing is woven into the morning routine. The master might rinse face, neck, and hands. The mistress have her hair washed once a week with rosemary-infused water. Full immersion baths are still occasional, but they are no longer rare. Copper tubs are kept in dressing rooms, and water is heated in the kitchen before being carried upstairs. For the wealthy, cleanliness is becoming a visible part of refinement. In the city's parks, philosophers and physicians walk together, debating the merits of cold baths versus hot. Some extol the invigorating effects of plunging into a cold stream. Others insist that warm water soothes the nerves and improves digestion. These discussions spill into coffee houses, where pamphlets are read aloud and argued over. Bathing is becoming not just a private habit, but a topic of public conversation, a sign that it is moving closer to the center of cultural life. The influence of travel remains strong. Returning diplomats and merchants speak of Russian steam baths, Swedish saunas, and the still thriving hammams of the Ottoman Empire. These accounts inspire imitation, sometimes in small details, a preference for hotter water, a new herb added to the wash, and sometimes in larger ventures like the construction of steam rooms attached to bathhouses in major cities. Yet change is uneven. In poorer districts, water is still drawn from pumps in the street, carried home in buckets, and used sparingly. Soap is expensive fuel more so, and full-body bathing is impractical for those who spend their days in hard labor. For them, washing hands, face, and feet remains the norm, with linen still doing the work of keeping the rest of the body clean. The Enlightenment's enthusiasm for hygiene is for now a privilege of the upper and aspiring middle classes. By evening, the city glows with lamplight, its streets alive with pedestrians strolling in the cool air. Behind the windows of elegant homes, you can see silhouettes moving in dressing rooms, the splash of water in basins, the slow steam rising from tubs. Bathing has not yet become an everyday habit for all, but in places like this, where ideas, wealth, and curiosity meet, it is well on its way to becoming not just acceptable, but fashionable. You leave the city by a quieter gate, the road ahead stretching into the gathering dusk. The air is crisp, carrying with it the scent of distant fires. Somewhere in the darkness, you know there are still countless villages where nothing has changed, where baths are taken once or twice a year at most. But here in the capital, you have glimpsed the future, a future where the sound of water being poured into a tub will no longer seem rare, and where the fear of bathing will slowly fade into history. The road out of the Enlightenment city leads you through a countryside that is slowly changing. The fields are still here, the hedgerows still shelter sparrows and rabbits, but in the distance you see something new: chimneys, tall brick chimneys spewing pale smoke into the sky, marking the outskirts of a manufacturing town. The steady hum and clatter of machines carries on the wind, mingled with the sharp tang of coal smoke. You're stepping into the late 18th and early 19th centuries, when the rhythms of life are shifting under the weight of industry. You enter the town through narrow streets lined with brick terraces. Here the air feels heavier coal dust settling on windowsills, the smell of oil from the factories. Crowds move with purpose, men and women in rough work clothes, children darting between carts. Water is still carried in buckets from pumps. But in some neighborhoods, you notice something new: public washhouses and communal baths built at the urging of reformers. These aren't luxury spaces for the elite. They're functional, often plain, meant to give workers access to a full-body wash for a few pennies. The industrial city is crowded, and disease spreads fast. Cholera, typhus, and other epidemics have taught hard lessons about the link, however imperfectly understood, between cleanliness and health. Public health movements begin to frame bathing not as a risky indulgence, but as a civic duty. Posters appear urging citizens to wash themselves and their clothing regularly. Newspapers publish editorials on the benefits of soap and water. The old miasma theory is still alive, but it's slowly being edged aside by new observations. Cleaner people get sick less often. In wealthier districts, the transformation is even more visible. The merchant houses and professional residences have begun to incorporate permanent bathing rooms. Large copper or tin tubs are set in tiled spaces, and servants carry hot water from kitchen boilers. In the grandest homes, experimental plumbing systems begin to appear primitive by your standards, but revolutionary here. Pipes carry water from rooftop tanks or nearby reservoirs, making it possible to fill a tub without dozens of trips up and down stairs. Fashion keeps pace with this change. Printed guides to modern living include sections on personal hygiene, encouraging the genteel to bathe at least weekly and to wash the face, hands, and feet daily. New soaps scented with lemon almond or lavender are marketed as gentle on the skin and pleasing to the senses. Perfume still has its place, but now it is layered over a body that is freshly washed, rather than masking weeks of accumulated odor. You visit a public bathhouse in the center of town, a sturdy brick building with separate entrances for men and women. Inside, the air is steamy and faintly scented with carbolic soap. Rows of cubicles line the walls, each with a small tub. Attendants circulate carrying buckets of hot water from great boilers in the basement. The clientele is mixed laborers after a week in the factory, young clerks, soldiers on leave. The atmosphere is practical, almost brisk, but there's a sense of satisfaction here. People emerge from their baths with flushed faces, combing wet hair, talking in low voices about the week's news. In the poorer quarters where pumps and privies still stand in the streets, the shift is slower. Old habits cling stubbornly, a quick wipe with a damp cloth, a change of linen, maybe a bath before a wedding or feast day. But even here, reformers are making headway. Religious charities operate free wash days where families can come to scrub clothes and bodies in large communal rooms. Doctors visit schools to lecture on cleanliness, holding up bars of soap as symbols of modern progress. You pass by a small bookshop, its window displaying pamphlets titled "The Art of Cleanliness and Bathing for Health and Comfort." Inside, the shopkeeper explains that such books sell well among the rising middle class, who see hygiene as a sign of respectability. A man who bathes regularly and wears clean clothes is seen as disciplined, trustworthy, and employable. A woman who maintains her appearance through regular washing is praised for her refinement. Cleanliness is becoming a social currency. By nightfall, the town glows with the light of gas lamps, their glass chimneys catching the flicker of the flames within. You walk past rows of houses, hearing the splash of water being poured into tin tubs, the murmur of families getting ready for bed. The idea of bathing has crossed a threshold here. It is no longer a dangerous novelty or an extravagant luxury. It is, for an increasing number of people, part of what it means to live in a modern, orderly world. Beyond the town, the road stretches into the darkness once more. You know that in the decades ahead, the combination of industrial innovation, medical science, and social reform will push bathing into the heart of daily life. But even now, in this moment, you can feel the weight of centuries falling away. The old fears receding, replaced by the hiss of water being poured, the scent of soap, and the quiet pleasure of being clean. The road ahead winds through a landscape that is neither entirely rural nor fully urban, a sprawl of factories, rail lines, and growing suburbs. The year feels closer to the mid to late 19th century now, and the rhythm of life is changing again. The smell of coal smoke still hangs in the air, but mingled with it is something newer, the faint sharp scent of soap drifting from a nearby works where bars are cut, wrapped and shipped to households across the country. Soap is no longer the harsh, lye-heavy slab of earlier centuries. Industrial processes now make it smoother, milder, cheaper, and increasingly available to everyone. You pass through a suburb where brick-terraced houses line freshly paved streets. Here, you notice something revolutionary: iron water pumps set at regular intervals connected to underground mains that draw from a central reservoir. The days of carrying every drop from a distant well are ending. In wealthier homes, thin iron pipes now run directly into kitchens and sculleries, sometimes even into upstairs rooms. This means water can be drawn more freely, making bathing easier and more frequent. In one such house, a family is preparing for their Saturday bath night, a new weekly ritual for the working and middle classes alike. The tin tub is brought into the kitchen, set near the hearth, and filled with water heated in kettles. Children go first, then adults, the water topped up with hot as needed. It is still a shared process, but it is regular, expected, and part of the household rhythm. Even in homes without their own bath, public bathhouses have become commonplace. Municipal authorities, spurred by reformers and doctors, build these facilities to combat disease and promote cleanliness as a civic virtue. You visit one such municipal bathhouse, a grand building with tiled floors, high ceilings, and rows of private bathing rooms. There are separate entrances for men and women, and even first-class and second-class facilities reflecting the still present divisions of society. For a small fee, you can have a private tub filled with hot water soap provided. Steam rises from the drains, the sound of splashing echoing down the tiled corridors. Notices on the walls proclaim, "Cleanliness is health." The connection between bathing and public health is now widely acknowledged. Doctors write in newspapers urging people to wash not just for personal comfort, but to prevent the spread of cholera, typhus, and influenza. Schools begin teaching children the basics of hygiene: wash your hands before eating, bathe regularly, change into clean clothes often. Employers start to see cleanliness as a mark of discipline and respectability. A man with greasy hair and stale clothes might be passed over for work. A woman whose hands and face are freshly washed is thought to reflect well on her household. Fashion reinforces the shift. Lighter fabrics, closer fits, and brighter colors show dirt more quickly, encouraging more frequent washing. The ideal of the well-groomed gentleman and the immaculate lady is now supported by regular bathing rather than by perfume and linen changes alone. Perfume remains popular, but it is applied after a wash, not instead of one. In the richer neighborhoods, the change is even more profound. Permanent bathrooms, once a rarity, are now becoming standard in new houses. Cast iron bathtubs lined with enamel plumbed directly to both hot and cold water supplies mean that a bath can be taken without days of planning and hauling. A servant may still prepare it, but the sheer ease of access makes it possible to bathe several times a week, or even daily. Gas and coal-fired water heaters are appearing, eliminating the need to boil water in the kitchen and carry it upstairs. You walk down a boulevard lit with new gas lamps past shop windows displaying porcelain sinks, polished taps, and full suites of bathroom fixtures. Plumbing companies advertise their services proudly. Soap manufacturers compete for customers with illustrated posters showing happy, healthy families beaming after a bath. The imagery is powerful. Cleanliness is no longer merely respectable. It is aspirational. Still, outside the cities, in rural areas where the old rhythms linger, full immersion baths may happen less often. Water must still be drawn and heated fuel gathered and tubs hauled into position. But even here, the influence of the new cleanliness is spreading. Traveling salesmen bring cheap soap, and local papers print health notices urging regular washing. The idea that bathing is a normal part of life has taken root almost everywhere, even if the practice itself is slower to follow. By the time you leave the town, night is falling. You pass homes where light spills from kitchen windows, catching glimpses of Saturday night baths in progress, steam curling up into the lamplight, the sound of water pouring, the sight of towels warming by the fire. It is a far cry from the world you first stepped into, where months could pass without a drop of water touching the skin. Now the scent of soap and the gleam of clean skin are becoming emblems of a new age, an age that sees bathing not as a danger, but as a daily pleasure and a mark of modern life. The road you follow now is lined with electric street lamps, their glow steadier and brighter than the flicker of gaslight. You've stepped into the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and the change is almost startling. The hum of machinery is constant in the background. Trains whistle in the distance and cities expand in every direction. But it's not just technology that's transforming the landscape. It's the way people think about their own bodies. You walk into a neighborhood of new brick row houses built for clerks, shopkeepers, and skilled laborers. Here, the bathroom is no longer a luxury for the rich. Many houses have one built in with a plumbed bathtub and a fixed basin. Hot and cold water come from taps fed by boilers in the basement. Bathing is no longer an elaborate production. It's something you can do in the time between supper and bed. A Saturday night bath is still a ritual in many homes, but more and more people are taking 2 or 3 baths a week, sometimes even daily. In the city center, department stores display entire bathroom suites, gleaming porcelain tubs, pedestal sinks, flush toilets. Advertisements urge customers to modernize their homes, showing images of smiling families gathered around bright-tiled bathrooms. Soap brands compete fiercely, launching national campaigns with catchy slogans about freshness and purity. Perfume is still sold, but it's marketed as a complement to cleanliness, not as a substitute for it. Toothbrushes, hairbrushes, and nail care sets appear alongside soap in store windows, each part of a growing market for personal grooming. Public health campaigns intensify. Posters in tram stations and factory break rooms remind workers to wash regularly, not only to avoid disease, but to be pleasant to be around. Schools have washrooms with basins and taps, and lessons in hygiene become part of the curriculum. Soldiers returning from military service where bathing is mandated bring the habit home, reinforcing the idea that regular washing is both practical and necessary. You visit a public bath and laundry complex in a working-class district. It's bustling with mothers scrubbing children in small tubs, men washing after long shifts, and attendants handing out towels and bars of soap. The water is hot, the air thick with steam, and there's a sense of pride here, pride in having a place where everyone, no matter their income, can be clean. In wealthier districts, the facilities are more refined with private cubicles, showers, and heated changing rooms. But the principle is the same: bathing is a part of life now. Fashion and advertising feed the momentum. Light-colored fabrics, short-sleeved dresses, and open-necked shirts show more skin, and the fresh look is prized. Hair is washed more often, sometimes with new liquid shampoos instead of soap. The connection between a clean body and social success is hammered home in magazine articles, etiquette manuals, and early cinema. A person who doesn't bathe regularly is no longer seen as cautious or frugal. They are considered backward, even suspect. You walk past a newsstand where glossy ads for soap and toiletries are displayed. They no longer focus only on health. They promise confidence, charm, and desirability. Cleanliness has become aspirational, tied to ideas of progress and modern identity. The old fears that bathing might weaken the body, invite disease, or waste resources are gone from mainstream thought. In their place is an expectation so ingrained that it will be passed down without question to the next generations. As night falls, you pass by houses where warm yellow light spills from upstairs bathroom windows. Inside, you can hear the rush of running water, the clink of porcelain, the muffled laughter of children splashing in the tub. The scent of soap drifts into the cool night air. It is a far cry from the centuries when water was an object of suspicion, when linen and herbs stood in for a bath, and when going unwashed was a point of pride. Now, in this modern world, the daily bath is both an ordinary habit and a quiet luxury, the closing chapter in a long, strange history of fear, adaptation, and change. And now, as you stand in the quiet street, the story settles into stillness. The houses are warm and lit within their inhabitants, clean and comfortable. The long road from suspicion to acceptance finally traveled. You can almost hear the centuries behind you, the creak of wooden buckets, the hiss of hot water poured into a tin tub, the murmur of voices debating whether bathing was a risk or a blessing. You think of the countless moments when water touched skin, the cautious medieval cloth wipe the perfumed Renaissance basin, the heated copper tub of the Enlightenment, the Saturday night baths of the industrial age. Each one a step, however small, toward the world you know now. It's strange to remember that there was a time when bathing was rare, even feared. Stranger still to realize that for most of history, people lived their whole lives without the habit you take for granted, the simple ease of stepping into a shower and letting warm water run over you. For them, water was heavy to carry, costly to heat, and often suspect in its purity. And yet they found their own ways to feel clean, to feel themselves. Now the hum of modern plumbing replaces the creak of the well rope. The scent of soap is as ordinary as the smell of bread baking or fresh laundry drying in the sun. Bathing is no longer a calculated act of risk and necessity, but a moment of comfort, privacy, and calm. So you turn away from the street, the lights fading behind you, the sound of water echoing softly in your mind. You've walked centuries tonight, and the journey has brought you here to a place where clean skin and warm towels are simply part of life.